Acadia After Dark is a horror podcast, and as such, may not be appropriate for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Acadia After Dark podcast. As always, I am the Reverend Redbeard, and tonight I am joined by Gideon Grey, local author and man with a great voice from the frozen north.
Oh,
Gideon,
geez.
will you say hi?
Hey, how you doing, everybody?
So, met Gideon here via Threads, chatting on social media, and I got to check out some of his work, and he's got some stuff coming up. So I wanted to grab him, get him on the podcast before he, becomes a fully committed and too busy to be on podcasts like my little show here, author, because it's amazing how fast that happens when you get some traction. But hey, Gideon, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, sure thing. First off, I'm not going to forget you because you're one of my favorite accounts in the horror sphere. I love what you're doing, love your work. But yeah, I'm Gideon Grey. I'm a horror author from Maine. I mostly grew up here. I was a military brat, and then I was in the military myself, so I was all over the place, as one does in that line of work. But now that I have settled down, put down roots, my wife is from the mid coast, and we settled here. And I'm just, I guess I'm swinging for the fences.
Right on. Well, that's definitely kind of the name of the game lately. Might as well do something while you got the opportunity. That's what I've been saying. So, I did get to read one of your stories that you had shared with me, and I was, of course, very interested in that. And then I see that you have plans for another one coming up here. Hold on, what was that? The one that you had me read. I'm trying to remember which one. Which one was the one you sent me?
Did I send you? Did I send you an unblinking eye?
Yes, that was the one. Yes, Unblinking Eye. Really enjoyed that one. And it says you've got The End of All Pity, a novel of American horror coming up. So, uh, based off of that, you're doing some pretty interesting stuff. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your influences in horror? Because I kind of picked up on some certain vibes from The Unblinking Eye, and I'm wondering if that's like a common thread.
Okay, sure. Well, so when I was 12,
Mhm.
I'm an ancient bog turtle, so I was 12 back in let's see, 97. Um,
Okay.
but when I was 12, I picked up The Wasteland in my school's library, The Wasteland by Stephen King. It's a third Dark Tower book. And from there, I was just absolutely absorbed into horror. I think a lot of people start with King, right? Um,
Mhm.
but my influences now, definitely, King got me started, but I would say writers like Adam L.G. Neville, he's a British author, John Langan. John Langan, if you'll allow me to sing his praises for a moment, I
Yeah,
think he
absolutely.
I think he has written probably the best horror novel of the last 20 years, in my humble opinion, in The Fisherman. Um,
Mm.
Absolutely staggering world building. Stephen Graham Jones, Tananarive Due, Alma Katsu, AC Wise. These are some of my influences.
Yeah.
And I mean, holy cow, there is an embarrassment of riches when it comes to horror and new weird right now. It just
Yeah.
such an incredible bullpen of authors working out there. So if I can you know, if I can hang with giants like that, then I'll consider myself very fortunate.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of the things in the last few years I've noticed as well is like, I like how you put that, is that there's an embarrassment of, riches out there, because it's honestly, horror has become more mainstream than it ever was. But as much as that I thought was going to be contributing to a lot of watered down stuff, it's actually kind of went the opposite direction. And I've noticed some of the best authors I've ever seen, and some even great horror movies in the last few years, have been by brand new artists in the last, like, probably decade, have been doing stuff that I'm just absolutely gobsmacked by some of the talent out there. And especially when I look at the internet sphere, encountering people like you that write, these short stories that, even though 20, 30 years ago, it would have been almost impossible to read a short story, something like Them Blinking Eye or something like that, right? Nowadays, you can just stumble across that sort of talent on the internet one day, and then, I mean, who knows what can develop from that now. It's really cool to see. So, I honestly, I had heard some of the authors that you had mentioned, and other ones are new to me. So I'm going to be going back through this and compiling a list to check out later on, because I am always looking for new stuff to read, and that's going to be really cool looking too.
Absolutely. Hit me up anytime. I will pour some sugar on you, as it were.
Yeah, I'm ready for that. So the plan with End of All Pity. So is that a short story compilation? What's up with this?
So the End of All Pity is a novel, and I guess the elevator pitch is it's a very incendiary look at what's happening in the country right now through a supernatural horror and kind of new weird lens. I'm writing it in the first person in real time, in present tense. So it feels, I guess, kind of like a movie like Silent House or something, where you're with the main character in one take, just experiencing what's happening to him in real time. It's
That's cool.
the antagonists are an authoritarian fascist regime, essentially. And you follow along with a guy named Nolan Grant and other survivors from his apartment building as they strike out and try to make it to kind of like a NATO-led extraction. But you get some flashback into how it happened. These people are called anti-Christians. That's the sobriquet that everyone uses. They hate it. And honestly, I would say that as things kind of escalate towards the third act, I'm a lot more forgiving of them. I give them an out. I give them a reason why they are the way they are, that I would say that their real life counterparts don't enjoy,
Sure. Kind of humanize them.
Kind of the other direction, but it kind of gives them a reason why it's a little less their fault than just straight up choosing, though choice is a big part of it.
Gotcha. That sounds very interesting. I'm definitely into that sort of stuff. I dig the not really the post-apocalyptic, but the, like, the impending apocalypse sort of angle, because that's one story that I don't think it's told enough in horror in particular. You usually see right at the beginning of something, or you see after everything has already happened and the dust is kind of settled. Very rarely do you see the progression of things. So I like the approach there, and the use of framing, and also kind of adding a political aspect to it, I think, is a really good thing. And it's not, a lot of people seem to want to shy away from that recently. Like, I'm sure you've seen some of that conversation in the horror sphere of, like, is horror political, or should it just be apolitical and stuff like that, which I don't know about your opinions on that. I've always kind of felt like a lot of the best horror is a critique of society, so inherently political, right? But I'd be interested in getting your piece on that.
Absolutely. I think that if you are of the opinion that art in general is apolitical, you are missing the the zeitgeist at large. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like art is informed by artists, and artists are informed by life. And so it is, I mean, even like the forefathers of science fiction and stuff, they were entirely informed by what was going on in their political landscape. I mean, for God's sake,
Mhm.
Tolkien, you know, like
Right.
Lord of the Rings was essentially an allegory, right, for World War II. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and it was heavily political, and of course, you've seen how people have taken that. Here it is, all these years later, and then people have taken and twisted their own interpretations of it, or completely missed it altogether, which is a wild thing to me. Like, because I'm very much of the same opinion as you, as I think that, like, if you just try to look at everything as being apolitical, you're kind of missing a big part of everything in art. So it's always been a weird thing for me when people just don't recognize that. It's like the people nowadays that will like say they're huge fans of like Star Wars or something like that, but then they're totally voting for the Empire, and it's wild to me. But yeah, the whole conversation, I've seen, different sides of it, and at this point I'm kind of like just it seems really like not really a catalyst, but an inflection point for some people in the horror sphere, because I saw that blowback that they had over the Terrifier director, saying he didn't want anybody of a particular political alliance to think that they should shy away from their movies. And I'm sitting here like, it's a really weird position to take as a fence sitter, like.
yeah, yeah. so I've got a little bit of a connection to Damien Leone through my
Oh
wife.
yeah.
Yeah, so my wife is Nugs the Final Girl, and she's, I would say like a medium horror influencer, and
Mm-hmm.
she's actually like, spoken with Damien and spoken with David Howard Thornton, who plays Art. And my opinion on Terrifier is it's not for me. I'm one of those
Yeah.
guys where I think that that torture porn is to horror what laughing gas is to comedy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
it evokes a visceral response for sure, and far be it for me to judge anybody's taste. I think that there's certainly a lot of very talented filmmaking that goes into those films, and they're a lot of fun. But I'm more of a pretentious asshole.
Yeah. No. I absolutely understand that. It's one of those movies for me too. Like, honestly, my fiance and I, we're kind of like, we go through phases with horror, where like we'll go from one movie where we'll really dig it, and then maybe another one that'll be a different genre or a different style or flavor of horror, and then like it just really doesn't hit for us. So when we saw Terrifier, the first one, um, we had just watched, I want to say it was like Smile or something like that, something a
Sure.
little more psychological that did have some blood and guts. But then we watched Terrifier, the first one, and man, we were like halfway through it, and I love the character of Art the Clown, but almost everything else about that movie, I was just like, this just isn't for me. Like, just did not hit for me. And I totally know what you mean, because it's almost like it's too over the top. It's too much. And I don't want to yuck other people's yum when it comes to this. Let them enjoy
Absolutely.
what they want to enjoy. Some people, that's their best horror movie they've seen. So I'm not going to tell them otherwise, because I see where if that's your thing, cool. Wasn't really mine. And so I haven't seen the third one. I saw
Same.
the second, I saw first and second. I was like, I think I get the point.
Yeah, well, and it's totally okay to admit that you're not the target audience for something, like
Yep.
there's certainly an evolution across that trilogy where I watched it just to give it a chance because my wife enjoys it so much. And there's certainly like a supernatural element that comes into play, and Art becomes kind of kind of this this supernatural otherworldly character, which I think adds to the narrative for sure. But yeah, I mean, you know, dude, so the scariest movie that I've seen as a grown up is Caveat by Damien McCarthy. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I have not.
it's the only film that has made me like peek through my eyes or through my fingers rather as an adult. There's
No
one
kidding.
scene, yeah, but I mean, a lot of other people might watch it and find it completely like banal or boring, you know. So
I'm gonna have to look that one up. I'm interested. I mean, I've seen in my adult life, I have seen very few movies that would make me actually like want to look away, or like I could say really made my skin crawl. And usually, it's the more realistic scenarios are the ones that really get me. You know, the ones that I can actually see happening in real life. The more fantastical they are, the more easy I'm able to disassociate from it.
sure,
But like that movie, years back, the first time I saw The Strangers, the
yep,
first time I saw that movie, I was like, I live out in the woods. I know that scenario, and it creeped me out. Not enough to where, like, you know, I lost sleep over it or nothing, but at the same time, I can envision that happening when you live out in rural Maine and just see, you know, some random people show up in your dooryard one day. And I mean, I've had that happen. Just luckily, it wasn't a bunch of psycho killers. It was just, you know, weirdo neighbors and stuff. But nonetheless, um, but yeah, the whole thing with the horror spectrum is an interesting conversation. What are some of your favorite horror movies right now, aside from, you know, Caveat, as you mentioned?
sure, okay. So some of my favorite horror movies, I guess, if I had to just drop them off the top of my head,
Mhm.
a dark song,
Mhm.
spring.
I don't know if I know that one.
So spring is by Moorhead and Benson. They're a directing duo that did like The Endless and uh I want to say they did Synchronic.
Hmm. Hmm.
But let's see some other horror films that I've really loved. There was a werewolf flick that came out a few years ago called The Cursed. I think
Oh yes.
I it, it certainly was not without a few flaws, but I think that it had such a refreshing folk horror take
Mhm.
on werewolves again. Trying to think of some other like I'm not much of like a splatterpunk guy. Um,
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, so for newer stuff, I haven't seen Oddity yet, which is the follow-up film by Caveat's director. I really want to
Uh-huh.
see that one.
Yeah. Is that
Uh,
how recent is that?
2024. So
Oh, so really new, yeah.
yeah.
New to me. I'm like a year behind on all movies, so like I still haven't seen Nosferatu yet. This is like,
Oh boy.
yeah, it's just one of those things. I have the bad part of it is I totally have access to it. Like I could stream it anytime. I just never get around to sitting down and watching a movie nowadays. Like my
It's
backlog
hard,
is
dude.
ridiculous. It's hard to settle down, and I know it's like the winter and it feels like we shouldn't have anything else to do, but I constantly find myself at odds with that. But yeah, I dig the folk horror stuff myself too. It sounds like you get into a lot of that stuff because I don't know what it is about it lately, the last few years. Some of these newer people directing these movies have been going to some really far out places that I've been absolutely digging. Um, I don't know if you saw it, because you were talking about the curse there. Um, there was another one that was similar to it that came out around the same time, and I'm trying to remember the name of it now because that reminded me of it. And I dig the different like kind of style of storytelling that it's the same, you know, it's a werewolf story, but the different interpretations that people can take on it, I found was really interesting. So I like that you brought that one up. Um, do you, with, oh, hold on, my dog's making noise. Yeah, with your upcoming stories and stuff like that. I've seen snippets that you've been posting online. Are those snippets taken from the book that you're currently writing, or are these just short stories you're working on as well?
So I am a very shameful workaholic. So I've actually got 4 books that I'm working on right now. I've got 2 novels and 2 short story anthologies. So yeah, so the 2 novels I have are The End of All Pity and The Pine Marten King, which is like a low horror fantasy.
Oh,
And then my 2 short horror anthologies are Celestial Poisons, which is going to be my take on cosmic horror.
okay, cool.
And then I'm also writing one that is specific to Maine, both folklore that is, native to here, and then also like some of my own stuff, like stories, little folk things that I came up with, and that's From the Pines and Other Deaths in Maine.
Oh, that's cool. I love that title. That's fantastic. It sounds like you got a pretty good spread there, covering all the bases, doing a little bit of everything. I see. I think it was the one the other day you posted was the cosmic horror one, and that one already has me peaked on that and checking out that story as soon as that comes out. But wow, man, you got a lot of projects going on. That's cool. But how are you juggling these? You just kind of pick up the one that feels right for the day, or are you just constantly scattershotting at them?
So essentially, what I try to do is a little bit of a take on Stephen King's workflow. He holds himself to 2,000 words or 6 pages, whichever comes first, every single day. And I certainly don't hit that goal every day. Gestures vaguely at the world. But I try to make myself write every day. I'll read the last couple of pages in The End of All Pity and kind of go with that. I'm kind of doing the pantser approach to that, if you're familiar, between plotters and
could you explain that one?
Okay, so plotters are people who create the framework, write an outline, write down major story beats, and then attack the book that way. And then pantsers sit down, kind of like read what just happened and just kind of become a conduit and let it flow through them. So with The End of All Pity, I'm doing the pantser approach, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Like, I have some set pieces in my head, but there are certainly things that have surprised even me so far.
I never heard of that term for it. It makes a lot of sense though. I guess personally, I'd be more of the panzer approach for myself with a lot of my writing, because I tend to let one week to the next dictate what I'm gonna do, and it's an adventure. I think it's kind of an interesting way to go about the creative process though, because even back when I did music, that was kind of always the same approach. It was just like from one song to the next, you weren't really sure what you were going to do. And then before you knew it, all of a sudden you had a whole album. And sometimes the beginning did not necessarily seem at all similar to the end, but it was still cool as shit to get there. So how in The End of All Pity there is coming out Q2, you're saying. So how close is this to where we're going to get to be able to read it?
So I would say I'm about halfway done with my first draft of the manuscript. I think, like everybody probably right now, I'm checking the news like 8 times a day, despite my best efforts not to. And I think that a lot of creatives right now are going through what I'm going through, which is kind of like, is it futile to do this? And and even though that little dark voice says that it is absolutely not futile. So if you're out there and you're an artist, make your art, because art fights evil through time. I'll get off my soapbox now. But
no, you're 100%. That's a valid point, and people do need to kind of hear that sometimes, because I don't think it gets said enough nowadays. So thank you for saying it.
Absolutely, yeah. And another thing I think I'm dealing with is, I think when you kind of come out the gate as an author, you're like, I want to write the next great American novel. I want to write the next, globally recognized masterwork. And what I've realized is you have to write what comes naturally to you. And for me right now, I'm not shying away from writing stories about good people who face down evil and good guys versus bad guys. And I don't think that it takes anything away from the substance of a story to follow the 3-act plan and to write good versus evil, because right now the world is upside down, and I think that it is absolutely okay to kind of cut away the fat and allow that message back into the world. I think we need it.
I totally get you there. It feels like for a while we were like went through this like almost like art became very cynical and almost nihilistic to a point of where it became a parody of itself. And nowadays I think people are kind of burnt out on that for the most part. Like I know for a lot of the early 2000s through the 2010s, that was every book I read, every movie that came out was like, everybody dies at the end, there is no hope, get over it, you know, whatever. So I think your approach to it is kind of a little more refreshing, and I think it would be good to hear that once in a while again, because it's been a long time since I've heard somebody actually say like, no, I want the book to, you know, make, you know, I want there to be stakes, but I don't want it to be that everything is gray and hopeless and malevolent. But that's wicked cool. I like that approach.
Yeah, and beyond that, I think that horror kind of followed this arc for a while where there was just maybe like a crumb of darkness, and it qualified as horror. I think for a long time, the trend in horror was sort of to make the subtlety as, I don't want to say diluted because that sounds judgmental, but subtlety was kind of the point for a while. It was, you know, you had these psychologically and morally gray characters, and it was kind of, everybody was in this big narrative arms race to write the most like nuanced artistic work that they could. And I think it's okay for I think it's okay to have a story about good versus evil, and The End of All Pity is definitely that.
That's cool. I'm definitely looking forward to checking that out. It is
it's
going to be on my reading list. I'm ready.
It is brutally violent. So I will just I'm just going to give a content warning right here.
Perfect. Love to hear it. A big fan of, you know, that sort of post-apocalyptic or, you know, just craziness in general. I think when it's done well, it's worth reading, and I'm very much looking forward to that one. So pivoting on to some, you know, slightly different topics, because I'm excited to read what you have, but I also want to hear some other stories, because one thing we like to talk about a lot on this show, because we are here in Maine, and I know a lot of people have had some weird experiences up here. So I'm going to ask you as a guest, have you ever seen anything when you've been up here in Maine? Ghosts, ghouls, otherwise?
In the parlance of our times, you bet your happy ass I have.
Yes.
Okay, so you want me to regale you with a tale of the uncanny?
Absolutely. Give me one of your best.
Okay, so I was 12 years old, and I was living on the highway between Dexter and Dover Foxcroft. And I had stayed home sick, you know, as one does back then. And, you know, 10 o'clock rolls around, and I'm like, you know, I'm feeling okay. Home by myself. I'm a latchkey kid, just like, you know, everybody from our generation. Sure. And I'm watching The Price is Right, drinking my ginger ale.
Normal day off.
Exactly right. And so I decide that I want to go on an adventure. Nobody's around to stop me. So I pack, you know, a couple peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, this kukri knife that I had that I thought was just the coolest thing in the world. And I strap it to my belt, and I go on an adventure into the woods, you know, like an idiot.
There was a lot of that back in the day, I remember.
and just the weirdest thing was I had this orange like calico cat, and he just like came with me, kind of like kept pace with me like a dog would. And it was just, even at the time, I thought that it was just this, phenomenally strange behavior from a cat, because they don't do that.
Yeah, no.
So I'm like making my way into the woods, and it had probably been something like an hour. And when you're a kid, you're fascinated by everything. I was following like old farm walls, like you'll find them out in the woods of Maine, where the old property boundaries of old farms that have been completely grown over. They're just these crumbled stone walls, and I was jumping over streams and stuff. And eventually it's something like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I came to this clearing, and it was the strangest thing, because like the trees just stopped, right? Almost like it was like a kept ground. And in the center of this clearing, there was like a stand of birch trees, but they were dead, like they had no foliage, but it was just dark inside.
Mm.
Like the sunlight should have penetrated, but it was just this weird shade.
Yeah.
And I could feel something like repelling me. Dude, like I get chills to this day. I'm going to be 40 this year. and the cat would not enter this clearing. Like he was like hissing and spitting. And I was like, I'm not going to be scared. I'm a tough 12-year-old boy. I'm going to face down evil.
Yeah, right.
Wind up on a milk carton somewhere.
Yep, usually.
But like I took a few steps in, and I felt like a presence, right? Just looking back at me from this stand of trees. And anyone who's not familiar with Maine, we have some old magic up here, y'all. We like it is. Stephen King writes about this place for a reason.
Yeah,
like it feels otherworldly here. Like the barriers are thin, and so eventually, my will breaks, and I'm like, you know what, I'm out. And so I kind of turn and hightail it back. And at this point, I'm convinced that I've just come face to face with like a primordial spirit of some kind. And so the cat follows me back. And that night, I have a dream where I'm like looking out. We had this window that kind of faced like our yard and stuff, and we had a vegetable garden. And I'm looking out, and I see like plants and dirt and like vines and stuff coalesce and stand up in like a bipedal figure. And it comes up to the window on the opposite side of the glass from me. And it speaks to me in kind of like a telepathic communication. And it just says, I am the Prince of Dirt. And then I wake up. And next day the cat's gone. And I'm pretty upset about the cat disappearing. But then like 3 days, I think it was like 3 days that pass, and the cat is on our doorstep, desiccated, like mummified.
Wow.
And to this day, I think that cat like sacrificed itself to protect me or us from this spirit. And that's actually a story that's going to be in From the Pines.
Wow, that's intense. It certainly sounds like that cat like did you all a favor. Unfortunately, I always feel bad when I find out something happened to the animal in the story. It's like, oh man, that always tugs at the heartstrings. It's like,
yeah, I mean, maybe I'm an optimist for a horror author, but I think there are benevolent forces too.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I'd say animals are definitely on the side of the light in that situation. Because
love that, dude. Side of the light.
The whole thing with the clearing description and stuff, I think any person that's like, if you're not from Maine, and you're right when you talk about how there's like a lot of old magic and a lot of old energies here, I don't think people really understand it until they've been here and they've actually walked through these woods and spent some time out there and really gotten a feel for it, how different it is from like anywhere else. Because I mean, I've lived up here most of my life, with the exception of a few years where I traveled and went down south. Most of my life has been here in Maine, and I spent a lot of time in the woods. So when you describe those areas of where it's just like kind of a uh, not really it feels like it's kind of like a barrier or something, just like a void. Like it's just, you're walking through the woods, you come into this space, and it feels like something else has already taken up that space, and it makes you not want to enter it. I've had that feeling too, and I don't think people really understand it until you've been here and you've had that moment where you come across that, and how chilling that really is. So, dude, I mean, honestly, you were probably lucky to have gotten out of there, because I mean, that's exactly the scenario that usually a person would just become a missing 411 or something at that point, honestly.
Oh yeah. Yeah, dude, people don't realize like the best way that I can describe the way a lot of places up here feel, especially like the older places, the abandoned places, the derelict places, they feel hungry.
That's
Like,
a very good description for it, honestly.
yeah, like I have a book planned called Places Hungry and Profane.
Mhm.
And it's gonna be about locations like that. Um,
That's
but
wicked cool. You got a way for naming these things, dude. That's another title. If I saw that on a shelf, I'd be picking that up immediately.
well, that's what I'm going for. So
You've got a gift for it. I'll say that much. I'll have to tap you to friggin' start writing some of the headlines for my stuff, because I am terrible at that part.
anytime, dude,
Body text,
anytime.
I'm good. Cover art, no, not my thing. So yeah, that was an intense story, man. The vibes are real when you talk about the woods out here. Have you had any other experiences when you've been here?
Yeah, actually. Actually, I have.
Let me have it.
So my folks split, and my dad was living in Dover Foxcroft on this street called Lincoln Street.
Mhm.
And it was like this this old Victorian, and if you're from New England, you know what the Victorians look like. They like legitimately they have towers. They're like 3-4 stories tall, you know.
Yeah, with the witch's windows up in the peak there and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so
Mhm.
so my siblings and I are home alone one night because, you know, that's what parents did in the 90s. They went out to, you know, their bar, their club, whatever of choice, and the
Yeah.
kids just kind of watched each other.
True
And
story.
and so we went up in the tower, and we noticed that the ceiling was like a drop ceiling, not, you know, not like a popcorn ceiling like you might be used to now, but it was like, you know, boards, which when moved, there was more tower.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
you know, being idiots like we went up and we found like an old, and I'm talking like hand carved wooden and ivory Ouija board. And my sister's like, you know, let's play with it. And I was like, hell no. Like we don't touch the forbidden magic.
Right.
But that night we go to sleep, and we wake up sometime around 11, you know, because I'm 13, 14 years old. My cousin's over, you know, we're the ones in charge. And we hear like crashing from downstairs. And so we go down, and we're like, what the hell is that? And we're listening, and we can hear something in the basement. So the whole crew, you know, my siblings, my cousin and I, we all pick up, you know, melee weapons like baseball bats and knives and stuff. And we kind of go down there, and we're like, you know, nobody's going to save us but ourselves. And 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 I shit you not, there are rats nailed to our walls, like
Wow.
freshly nailed, like twitching nailed in the basement.
Oh.
And there's like a Baphomet carved in the dirt because the floor was dirt, you know. And in retrospect, maybe the Ouija board was a coincidence, and maybe it was just, you know, local hoodlums trying to scare us. But all things being equal, it was weird enough that that we ran upstairs, hid in a bedroom until my parents got home, and kept the weapons trained on the door.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, you were home the whole time. You hear the banging downstairs. You go down, and then there's all of this stuff. I mean, without you hearing a trace of anybody, I mean, honestly, yeah, that sounds terrifying. I wouldn't have known what to think. Or, I mean, it's weird how often, and this maybe is the main thing, maybe it's just a New England thing, but how often these old houses have just hidden Ouija boards in them.
Oh, dude.
That is like such a common thing up here, and I don't think really people appreciate how odd that is. Like,
Yeah, and it was real enough that my parents called the cops, right? Like we
man.
were like, yo, the basement ain't right. Go check it out. And they called the cops, and they came and they were like, well, looks like somebody's been here, we'll look into it, and nothing ever came of it. But you're not wrong, dude. Like the number of people, just the sheer ratio of people that I've spoken to over the years who are from here, they're like, yeah, this place is haunted, straight up. Just
oh yeah,
it's a haunted state. So
yeah, oh, it feels that way. Like everywhere I freaking go around here is like ghosts just galore. I mean, I mean, no joke. If you go, I was telling somebody recently, like you go to any odd town in this state, we have like 5 of them that regularly make the list of just like most haunted places in America.
Yep.
And then we have some of the oldest ones in the world too. I've covered some of them on my show. There's plenty of, stories of like these older buildings and stuff like that have been just sitting derelict for years and have just all these crazy stories behind them. When I was a little younger, we got this bookcase given to us, and I don't remember exactly where we picked it up, but we were messing around with it one day, and I realized that the bottom shelf, like another shelf insert, had fallen down into it. So it was like there was like a recessed bottom. So I open up this recessed bottom, and then there's literally, no joke, a little wooden black and red Ouija board
Hell no.
mentioned in this bookcase. Yeah, and that was the first reaction my mom at the time had. She was like, just get that thing the fuck out of here. She was like, there's no way that it like, she's like, did you put that in there? I'm like, I've never seen this thing before. We just freaking discovered this bookcase has been sitting here for months and nobody noticed the shelf being here. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but that's just a thing that happens all the time up here, apparently, because that's like the 3rd time in not even the last week that somebody was just saying on, I want to say it was on one of my threads posts. They were like, oh yeah, I found this old Ouija board and ended up having like a whole possession story go along with it. And I was just like, what the shit? Like, what's going on with this place? But when you have you had any other like haunting phenomena? Because like the rats like being pinned to the walls sounds like the beginning of a catalyst to like a lot of other activity. Did you have anything else happen in that house, or was that just kind of a one and done incident?
So it's funny you should ask that, because there was one night that I woke up and I felt like I was being pressed into my bed, like physically, like pushed down on my chest, and now we know all about like sleep paralysis and stuff like that. But like in my head and like audibly in my ears, it was like discordant hosannas being sung, like hymns, but they were like severely out of tune. And to this day, I felt like I was fighting something off that was trying to like take sovereignty of me, if you will. And to this day, like it gives me chills when I remember that night, because I ended up just kind of flopping out of my bed and crawling to the living room and getting the family Bible and singing Jesus Loves Me.
Yeah.
Until it subsided. I was a young guy. Yeah, I was a little guy, and yeah, but I felt like I was being physically pressed into my bed, like held down, and hearing that stuff. Yeah, so it's strange you asked that.
it's even with that sort of stuff, that sounds something very demonic. And like you said, yeah, I know that like we know more about sleep paralysis and the science and the psychological effects behind all of these things and stuff. But to me, that doesn't necessarily fully discredit like people's accounts of like having things happen like that, right? Because two things can be true at the same time. In my mind, I'm like, if you have all this weird activity in the house, who's to say that this isn't like being caused by some sort of an entity or something like that? Because I don't know about you, I do believe in a lot of that stuff. I think that like probably 99% of like the stories and stuff that people tell, there's probably a pretty reasonable logical explanation for, but that still leaves 1% of a whole lot of weird things that happen we don't understand. And yours certainly sounds like it falls on that level, because I would understand if one weird thing happened, but typically when you have multiple weird things happen in the same location, it makes it a little harder to disregard in my mind, you know?
Yeah, well, and I guess you could say that like I would have a skeptic's mind if it wasn't for, so I've got this theory, right, that like eventually like science and spirituality are going to be found to be parallels.
Mhm.
And because I mean we know right, that like our senses perceive, what is it, like 1/millionth of reality,
Yeah,
so
something
it's
to
like,
that effect. Yeah.
so we have no idea if we're overlapping other dimensions we can't perceive. We have no idea. Like,
Hmm.
when you don't have the instruments and the senses to know if something's there, you have no idea if it's there. So you have no overlap, or no idea whether, there's overlap or convergence occurring. Like, yeah, I think that scientific absolutists are actually not being all that scientific. If
Yeah.
you think without question that there's nothing that you don't understand, you're already lost to the scientific method.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Makes a lot of sense to me. I've had the same opinion about other things like UFOs, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Said for a long time, I'm like, people that will just arbitrarily be like, no, there's no life out there or something. I'm like, we know literally nothing about it. Like we have no possible way of making an accurate judgment on that. Why would we presume to know that? And if you do, yeah, you're right. They're kind of already shutting down the scientific method before they ever really give it a chance to fully develop. And I agree with you also with what you say about how spirituality and science is probably a parallel and will ultimately come that way, because even a lot of my own research kind of does back that up, because I find that if there's something that is proven, it's replicatable in a lot of instances, and we just don't have the method to measure it yet. And that's what I think a lot of paranormal research focuses on nowadays compared to what it was, obviously, 30, 40 years ago, where it was a lot more about parapsychology. Nowadays, I think it's a lot more science based and people trying to find ways to use different instruments to measure or to quantify the things we don't understand. And when you see the
Absolutely.
stuff that scientists are able to observe now, I think we are getting closer to understanding it than we ever have been, but we're still leagues away from where we need to be. And you're right, we have no way of knowing what else we're missing, because there is this whole unseen world, as they call it, around us. We've always had this, we've been a part of it, but we just don't know how to kind of filter it, right?
Yeah, and you bring up aliens, right? And
Mhm.
we'll include aliens, or I'll include aliens in what I'm about to say. But
Mhm.
we have the working theory that space is infinite, right? And so by definition, something that is infinite contains infinite possibilities. So if space never ends, everything that is possible exists somewhere.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
that,
I think that that's a pretty accurate description there. It makes a lot of sense.
and that's just stuff that we would consider to be extant by our senses. And then if you imagine it in like Cartesian coordinates with, space and time being like X and Y,
Mhm.
then then Z, I would say, is scale. You know, things so much bigger or smaller than us on like the atomic scale, that they'd be completely unknowable. You wouldn't know if your entire universe was just like a positron in someone else's atom. You have no idea.
Yeah, I always remember that one shot. You probably remember because you're about the same age as me. The Men in Black movie back in the day.
Black, where they're
That
playing
shot
marbles
where
with
they
our
zoom
universe.
into the marbles, yes, and that's like always stuck with me ever since then. Because like on the macroverse, microverse, and you know the ultimate universe scale, we don't know where we fit into the whole equation. And you're right, we don't have any way of being able to observe something that is so far beyond our comprehension. We only know about what I think it's up to like something like the 12th dimension theoretically, which still leaves however many planes of existence beyond that we have no way of knowing about. So definitely an interesting angle. And hey, what's scarier than the thought of the unknown, you know? Now that you mentioned that, like that kind of brings up another one, and this is something that I was recently looking about recently. Have you ever heard of the dark forest theory?
Dark Forest by Chich Liu in Three Body Problem. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. So that whole thing, I recently have been like looking into that, and man, somebody told me like, you read this, that's going to terrify you, and I was like, yeah, you're right, it did. Like now that I have a little more perception of where we sit in that position, yeah, that is a terrifying thing to conceive of, honestly. And I don't know honestly, when we look at the grand scale of things and our little spot in the universe now and how messed up things seem here, when you look further out there, like what else could there be, you know?
Yeah, and Dark Forest theory is it's frightening because it's plausible, right? Like it makes a lot of sense. But I also think that there's a bleakness to it that is not entirely plausible. Maybe it's wishful thinking. You know, if you enjoy Three Body Problem, I really encourage you to read. It's a duology by this scientist turned author named Dr. Peter Watts rather. For the first book is Blind Sight, and the second is Echopraxia, and they're kind of simultaneous. They're two novels about two separate ships that are sent in two directions after all of these things appear in our atmosphere in essentially a grid, and they're like iron ferrite or something, and they all burn up at once. And the prevailing theory is that something just took a picture of our whole planet.
Oh.
And so then like our sensors pick some stuff up, and I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah.
But it's written by a real life scientist, like physicist, biologist. Like this guy knows his
those
stuff.
are always cool.
And his writing voice, his voice as a writer is incredible. But this dude has vampires that hold up to scientific scrutiny, zombies that hold up to scientific scrutiny. Like his stuff is wild. And if you like Three Body, please read Firefall.
I am gonna have to look that up because that sounds fantastic. And man, I love, one of my favorite things about speaking to authors, and especially getting to interview them, is because you all know the best books. And every time I talk to one of you, I end up coming out with a reading list that I know is going to take me a year to get through, but I'm always happy to hear it, man. So, hey, we're approaching about the hour mark of the show. So typically at this point, I would go ahead and I'd ask, where can we find you? What do you want to plug before we wrap it up for tonight?
Sure. So you can find me under Gideon Grey or Gideon Grey Author on all your social medias. My biggest presence is Facebook, but I'm starting to establish myself on Threads and so on and so forth. But yeah, any announcements are going to be through my social medias. I'm definitely most active on Threads. I don't know why, But yeah,
It's been cool
Gideon
coming
Grey.
there. Uh, I know it's the same with me. I don't know what it is about it, but it just seems like a lot more engaging community on that side of the internet.
Yeah, I hope that the Fediverse kind of takes off and we get decentralized social media that's not algorithm driven. I think that the algorithm at large is kind of like this giant psychic vampire that's been feeding on all of us for a long time.
I 100% agree. I feel that, man. That's been a struggle of this whole last few years for sure, and it's amazing how many people don't realize the influence it has. I mean, honestly, we could probably do a whole podcast episode just talking about that, because I've seen enough in the last few years. I'm pretty sure you've seen a lot of it too, because holy crap.
Oh yeah.
The internet's a wild place.
But hey, dude, I want to say thank you. I came into this expecting to have a good time. We seemed to hit it off on Threads, but I had a great time. So thank you so much for having me.
Hey, dude, I appreciate it. I loved having you on. It's been a great chat. I hitting you up on Threads. I just like, this is a guy I definitely want to have on the show because, like I said, definitely seemed to hit it off. I'll definitely have you back too once your book drops. I want to make sure I schedule you in because yeah, we had a good conversation. I'll bring you back pretty soon here because honestly, I've got every week we're going to do a different interview, and by the time that your book comes out, I think I'll be due to hear about what you got up next. So let's plan on that, man.
Awesome. I can't wait.
But I appreciate you coming on. It's been a great chat. We're going to go ahead and probably end up, I'll see what ends up happening in the near future though. But if nothing else, I'll be getting in contact with you to get more of your book lists and stuff because you got some good ideas there.
Absolutely. My pleasure, dude.
All right. Thanks for coming on, bud.
All right. You have a good night.
Yep.